We got a really amazing and apropos Torah portion this week. It's like we learn the same things every single year, and yet with everything that's going on, it becomes more and more relevant, and we start seeing how eternal the Torah really is when it applies to situations that only God would have known where we would be right now, and the lessons and the message that we need to hear in our time. But this week's Torah portion is titled Emor, which is all about speech. It's a soft and a gentle type of speech. There in Hebrew, there's different words for command, for instruction, for harsh speech, and sort of a warm and gentle speech. So daber is more of a harsh type of language, and emor is a soft speech. And the Jewish custom is that we refer to this week's Torah portion as emor, just the very idea of speech. So I'm going to share a screen and we'll learn the first verse in this week's Torah portion together. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, and Hashem spoke to Moshe, Emor el HaKoyanim, B'nei Aharon, speak to the Kohanim, the descendants of Aharon, V'amarta Aleichem, and tell them, L'nefesh lo yitame ba'amav, there are special laws of purity that a Kohen has. He's not allowed to get tamei. Now, this week's Torah portion is not called Emor el HaKoyanim, speak to the Kohanim, but just Emor Stam. So it teaches us something about speech, that it's not just allowed, but needs to be spoken of a lot. And this Emor, why does it say Emor v'yamarta? It says speak to them and tell them over, because you want the elders to tell the children, to have the parents instruct the younger. And so this type of speech is something that is commanded by the Torah, but we have somewhat of a paradoxical challenge to the idea of unrestricted speech. There is a Mishnah in Perkei Avos that says, Shimon b'nai Omer, Shimon, he says, Shimon, his son, says, Kol yamai gedalti bein hachachamim, all my life I grew up amongst the sages, v'loi matzasi leguf toiv ela shtika, and I haven't found anything better for the body than silence. V'loi hamidrash hu ha'ikar ela ha'maisa, the study is not the main thing, but the deed, the action. V'chol hamar b'devarim mevichet, and whoever adds and speaks too much is bringing about sin. So there's different types of speech. We have famously in the Shema where we say, "V'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam." You should teach it to your children and speak of them. V'shivtecha b'veisecha, when you're sitting down in your homes, v'leftecha v'derech, v'shavtkum kumecha, when you go on the way, and when you get up, and when you lie down in the morning and the evening. We're always speaking words of Torah. So if this is the command to speak words of Torah, then what is it talking about in our parsha where it says, Emor el HaKoyanim, to speak to the Kohanim? The word Emor el HaKohanim makes it sound like there is no limits. You gotta speak and speak and speak. But we know from the Talmud that there is a concept of li'olam yishana adam letalmudai derech kitzara, that you should always teach your student in the shortest manner possible. The Torah is very concise. As you know, every word in the 5 books of Moses is very particular and very concise. And why? Because God's taking a book, he's taking a page out of his own playbook, which is, when it comes to teaching Torah, you're always supposed to do it in the most short and concise way possible. and not to elaborate unnecessarily just for the sake of, I don't know, making it sound sophisticated or enlightened. You try to bring across as big of an idea. It doesn't say to teach a short wisdom, but to teach the wisdom in a short manner. You always try to give over the maximum amount of wisdom in the shortest amount of time, in the most concise way. And so when it comes to Vidibarta Bum, that type of speech, there is kind of limits on it. So what is the Emor of this week's Torah portion talking about? What kind of speech is it referring to? So we need to shed light on the different types of categories of desirable and beneficial speech. It says, say a little, and if I don't find anything better for my body, it said, the words of Torah should be brief, but rich in substance. So in what type of speech are we meant to speak a lot about? Now, the Rambam has whole categories of different types of speech that, this is obligated speech, this is permissible speech, this is forbidden speech. So in which category are we meant to add and speak a lot? It's not when it comes to what?
Tradition, our heritage, our tradition, our moral.
Right, so you would think when it comes to Torah, you would want to speak a lot, and really that's true. We should be learning Torah all day and night, but there is, in a way, a certain limit on that we're trying to do it as concise as possible, or perhaps even in a concise manner, you want to do it as much as possible. But to bring out a unique type of speech, which is a real paradigm shift in how interpersonal relationships work, and a type of speech that's not necessarily Torah speech, but nevertheless so desirable that the Torah says, Emor, and look at this open-ended way, we have to look at the very paradigm of what speech is. So when a mortal king speaks, his words are more than just speech alone, because when a king says a command, then it's acted upon. If a king says execute him, he's no longer here. So similarly, our sages say, God spoke and the world came into being, which means the power of speech can create or, God forbid, destroy worlds. There was a story of some of the Hasidim of the Baal Shem Tov, and one of the individuals was getting really worked up and upset at one of his friends, and he said, I feel like tearing you up like a fish. And the Baal Shem Tov heard that, and he said, everybody gather in a circle and put your arms on each other's shoulders. The Baal Shem Tov was the last one to close the circle, and he put his arms on the shoulders of the two gentlemen closest to him. And all of a sudden, everybody saw this shocking image of this man ripping up his friend like a fish. And they shrieked and they let go. Because there's a concept that everything that we say down here has an impact up on high. Especially when it comes to Jewish people. When it says, you are all cleaving and connecting to the living God. Which means just as God's words can create worlds, similarly, we have a tremendous power within our speech. There's a concept that the righteous, their speech resembles the Creator, and that they have the capacity, as it were, to bring about an effect through their speech. So this is very much connected to the time that we're in. We're counting the Omer. We're going from Passover to Shavuot, but it's a time of mourning as well, because the students, 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, were dying because they didn't express proper kavod, honor to one another. Now, these were students of Rabbi Akiva who preached that loving your fellow as you love yourself is the fundamental precept of the Torah, and nevertheless, even Rabbi Akiva's students had that fallout, and we avoid listening to music during this time. We find even in the days of David HaMelech, there were such pure children who knew how to learn Torah in such an amazing way that if you presented them with an article, like an item like a fruit or something, they could give you 49 reasons for why this garment is tahor, pure, or 49 other arguments as to why it would be tameh. They were so bright that they were able to look at it from every which angle and see the entire thing. And yet, despite all this praise, they would go out to war and fall in battle. And the Medrash says, why did they fall in battle? It's because they weren't so careful with Lashon Hara. Now, Lashon Hara, malicious gossip, is not something where you're making up lies about another person, but you're speaking the truth. But you're bringing out the qualities that are negative in another. The Talmud has an interesting discussion where it talks about the three cardinal sins, the three sins that you would rather give up your life than to commit these grave acts. Do you know what those three sins are? Because generally the Torah says v'chai b'hem. We have to live by the Torah. And so if somebody in a medical emergency and they have to drive to get to the hospital for the treatment, you break all the restrictions of Shabbos in order to save a life. And similarly with all of the mitzvahs, 610 of them, you would rather break the mitzvah to preserve a life, because we're meant to live by the Torah. The Torah is the way of life, rather than commit that. But there are three that are called chayk v'lo yaver. And the Talmud discusses what is so grave about each one. They are murder, immoral sexual relations, and idolatry, denying divine unity. And after going into this discussion about these three, it says that there is one thing that is called the third speech, that is equal to all three, and it kills three. It's an interesting play on words, so I'll show you the text inside. It's from Talmud Tractate Erchin. It says, Ba'amarava in the West, in Eretz Yisrael, Amri, they say, Lashon Talisai, third speech, Kotil Talisai, kills three, Hoireg Lemesparai Ulemakabloi Ulaimrai. It kills the one who speaks it, the one who hears it, and the one about whom it is said. So this third speech, which is now playing on that same word, talisoi, these three grave cardinal sins, are compared to lashon hara. Third speech, meaning it's a euphemism for speaking about a third party, not speaking to the person in front of you, not speaking about myself, speaking third speech, which is aka lashon hara, speaking negatively about another, kills three people. The question asked is, when somebody commits a transgression, so they're liable to what it is that they said. But for the person listening, what were they supposed to do? Or say that's why we have earlobes. So if somebody's speaking lashon hara, you could say, I don't consent to hearing such words. So the receiver is also in a position where he is able to refuse to listen to lashon hara. But what about the person upon whom the statement is being said? What did they do wrong? Why does the Talmud say it kills three people? The person speaking, the person hearing, and the person about whom the Lashon Hara is spoken. It's not his fault. He didn't do anything. It's somebody else that's talking about him.
Maybe I'll entertain the thought, maybe that's how he pays for something else he did.
So Hashem's justice is always fair, and there's always, some sort of, bigger reason. But it's not exactly a karma system, but rather there is a cause and effect to the very Lashon Hara. And sorry, I keep using the word Lashon Hara. It means evil talk. It refers specifically to talking negatively about someone else, even if what you are saying is true.
So my question is social media Lashon Hara?
A lot of it, yeah. I mean, it's a platform, so it could be used for sharing Torah and sharing positive things, and for but yeah, it's a cesspool of Lashon Hara as well. Absolutely.
So what does the person who's has to do with it really? It's like bad luck.
Right. So that to analyze that and to really be able to get to the main point of this class, which is going to teach us a new tool and how to flip the script and be able to use both our interpersonal relationships and conversations, as well as social media and everything for a positive in a positive way. We are going to analyze two halachas from Maimonides, from the Rambam, and find certain discrepancies within them in order to bring out something very fundamental and very positive about the power that speech can have on another. If in a negative way, we can understand it, we'll be able to see the profound impact and the positive even more. So near the beginning of the Rambam's magnum opus, known as the Mishnah Torah, he writes all the halachas, and in that he speaks about specifically the characteristic of a Talmud Chacham, somebody who is a Torah sage, has a certain moral caliber that they need to hold themselves to, that is beyond the regular midot of the average individual. And then in the next set of halachas, he's talking about a universal command to love your fellow as you love yourself. And in both of them, he speaks about this mitzvah of Lashon Hara. So first, Maimonides, Hilchos Deis, chapter 5, Mishnah 7. It says, Talmud Chacham lo yeh tzeichek v'seiveach v'shas diburei kebehemes v'chayes. A Torah sage shouldn't shout or shriek while speaking like the cattle and wild beasts, nor should he raise his voice overly much. Instead, he should speak gently to all people. In addition to speaking gently, he should take care not to stand at a distance, lest his speech appear like he's screaming at somebody or the speech of a haughty. He should greet all men before they greet him, so that they'll be pleased with him. I mean, for most people, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks of you, but for a Talmud Chacham, he's held to a higher standard, and he's meant to greet people before they greet him in order that people should be pleased with him. And then this is the line that we want to focus on. V'dan es kol ha'adam l'chaf schus. He should judge each and every person in a good measure, in a good light. Misaper b'shevach chaveirei, to speak positively about his friend. V'loi b'genusoi klal, and not bad about him whatsoever. Oyev Shalom, V'Roidev Shalom. You should be like the characteristics that we use to describe Aharon, a lover of peace and a pursuer of peace. So in describing the attributes that a Talmud Chacham is supposed to be, it says he should judge everybody favorably, never speak anything negative about anybody else, and judge his friend favorably, and love peace and pursue peace. Now, when it comes to the mitzvah of Avas Yisrael, there's a mitzvah kol adam lo'oyeves kol echad v'echad miYisrael. There's a mitzvah upon each and every individual, even if they're not a big Talmud Chacham. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to love your fellow as you love yourself. Like it says, v'ahavta l'reacha kamaycha. Love your fellow as yourself. Lefichach, therefore, sorich l'saper b'shivchoi. You have to speak of the praises of others. V'lachos al mamane kasher uchas al mamin atzmai, and be careful about their money the same way you would be careful about your own money. V'ratza b'chvoid atzmai v'amischabed b'kaloyin chaveiroi ein lo chelek li'olam haba. Whoever gains honor through the degradation of his colleague is someone who doesn't have a share in the world to come. That's how important it is to treat our fellow with so much dignity and respect, and try to speak only kind and uplifting words about our fellow.
This is only relevant to Chacham, or if I don't I think I'm Chacham, I can keep it.
So there were two laws that we learned. The first one was applying specifically to a Chacham, and some of the differences between the two is by the Chacham it said they should never speak anything negative about another. Which you could ask, hold on a second, shouldn't that apply universally? Right? Well, there is a concept of, we had in last week's Torah portion, you shall surely rebuke your fellow. Now, even with that, of course, there's regulations around it and how to do it in a way that can be accepted and will be pleasant. But nevertheless, there are certain circumstances in which the prohibition of Lashon Hara doesn't apply. If by speaking about something that somebody did, to them or whatever, you're going to help them to do teshuvah. But nevertheless, there's a certain character that is being described as a chacham who doesn't speak negatively about another whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
He exclusively speaks positive.
Frustration.
So when we're frustrated with protesters or terrorists, what do we do?
So it's first of all, we're talking about the mitzvah of Avas Yisrael, which when the Torah says you have to l'reyacha kamoicha, means your fellow Jew, and so we don't want to ever denigrate the character of our fellow Jew, but rather try to judge them favorably as to how they got there or what makes them want to parrot such ideas. But to answer your question, we really need to get into what speech does and when we speak about another, what it brings out in them. Because, like Nick asked, why would that type of characteristic be associated specifically with a Torah scholar? What about the rest of us? So it's possible to offer the following explanation. Directly before stating that we need to judge every person favorably, the Rambam says that the Torah scholar must conduct himself in a manner that causes people at large to derive satisfaction from him. And therefore, he has to speak gently with everyone. On this basis, a distinction can be drawn between a Torah scholar and other people. When somebody sees a person who's acting in an undesirable way, a person has to do whatever they can to nullify that undesirable factor. But there are different ways to go about that. a person who's not a Torah scholar and therefore doesn't have this special command that they have to be pleasant before everybody, that people at large should derive satisfaction from him, should admonish the other person and tell them, you got to stop doing this negative thing. You got to stop joining these encampments of hate and start building bridges of love instead.
Mm-hmm.
But if
Definitely.
somebody's a Torah scholar, then it's very important to speak gently to all people. In this way, he nullifies the undesirable qualities in his fellow Jew in a nachas type of way, in a gentle and genial manner, by speaking favorably of his fellow and not denigrating them at all. Because the very fact that he speaks positively about his fellow reveals that person's virtues and positive qualities. And then it weakens his fellow's undesirable qualities and ultimately leads to their nullification. Because what happens when you focus on that negative trait? There is a concept that speech brings things from sort of the abstract world into the concrete. There was an idea how there are certain concepts that can exist sort of in the supernal intellectual spheres, but then by speaking it out loud, it makes it drawn down into this world, and then something that later can be more readily understood. So that's in our own life, when we study Torah out loud, it can bring out those concepts and allow us to understand them. But there's even this fantastical story of Rabbi Yosef Karo. Rabbi Yosef Karo was a great sage who authored the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. And one night, he was busy studying some very difficult texts and was working on this tremendous, very complex puzzle. And he spent all night, he couldn't go to sleep. He was studying and studying and studying. And after working through, and he was Bucky, he was well-versed in all the scripture, all the Talmud, he knew it all, but he was trying to piece this together, analyzing it and looking at it from all the angle. And finally, when the sun started coming up, he had a breakthrough. And this wondrous idea, he jotted down some notes. It was amazing, something marvelous that only someone like Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, would be able to do. So now it's morning. So what do you got to do? You got to go to the mikveh. You got to get ready for the morning prayers. He gets up from his studies. He's ready to start getting ready for the next day. He didn't get a chance to sleep all night because he was working on this puzzle. And as he's walking out of the Beis Medrash, he hears there are two students who have just woken up and are starting to study early, first thing in the morning. And they're learning the same exact page that he was learning. And they noticed the same problem that he was wrestling with the night before. And they're studying Bechavrusa, and they're talking it out. And they're giving this suggestion, that suggestion. And he's listening in because this is just what he was wrestling with all night. So he's really fascinated. And within a few minutes, one of the Bachrim, the students in the yeshiva, was like, this is the way to solve it. And he comes up with the same exact solution that had never been discovered, never been written before, never been... the same exact solution that Rabbi Yosef Karo had just worked all night to figure out, the greatest of minds. He was a little bit, not necessarily despondent. He wasn't really full of himself, but he was so blown away by this experience that he said, I need to go to the Arizal. Now, in Tzfat, there were some great Torah scholars like Rabbi Yosef Karo, but if he needed a mystical explanation for things, he would go to the Kabbalist. He would go to the Arizal. And he went to the Arizal and he said, explain to me what happened here. How is this possible? And they were good friends, and they studied together. You know, the Rizal was a Kabbalist, but he was also well versed in the legal and revealed dimension of Torah. And he knew the caliber that Rabbi Yosef Cairo was on. And so he said, this is what happened. When you worked all night to figure out the key to that puzzle, you brought it down and made it accessible in this world. And once it's there, even if you didn't share it, you didn't give the lecture yet, you didn't explain it to anybody else, the very fact that you brought it from the other worlds and brought it out through speech into this world already made it accessible to anybody who in the future is studying that same passage, that they'll be able to figure it out. Because it was already manifest, it was already brought into this world. So similarly, this is the power of speech. When we speak about another, why does it kill three people? The person speaking, the person listening, and the person about whom was spoken about? Because maybe that person does have negative traits. Don't we all? We have certain dirt, we have certain things. But if it's left unspoken, it could remain dormant. It could remain unactivated. But when we speak negatively about another, it brings it out into this world. And then without the person upon whom the Lashon Hara was stated even knows that that trait was spoken of, it already makes it more readily available to act that way. So you speak about, a fellow Jew, and you say, oh, what on Russia, what he did, and what he's capable of, and where he's come. Just by bringing out those words, you already make it much more manifest and likely to come into action. Of course, every person still has their free choice, and so it's not to minimize that ability, but in the sense that it kills three parties, it does that by making a trait that would otherwise be abstract or dormant manifest and revealed. So had those negative qualities never been mentioned, it's entirely possible that they would have remained concealed and then wouldn't have caused the undesirable consequences. But this is where the real flip comes in. There's a principle of mida toiva meruba mida peraniyos. There's a great principle in the Talmud that the positive attributes far outweigh the negative attributes. So if speaking about a person's negative qualities brings an undesirable effect for him, so how much more so is the converse true? That if you speak about a person's goodness and virtues, then it will for sure have a positive effect. It will reinforce him and help him in his divine service. Such talk will bring into revelation and actual expression the good and the virtues that he possesses.
So what about two other situations where you want to share an experience you had versus Lashon Hara, but both you won't be talking so positively about that person. Now, of course, when you share an experience, you need to focus on your feelings about it, but still there's a little bit of that little pie that you were, expressing negative action that belongs to negative traits. And on the same way, warning somebody, if it's your good friend and you just have a feeling that you want to warn about some potential, and not necessarily about theft and stuff. This is on the obvious, but this little gray area.
Yeah, because we can't be delusional and we can't be dishonest, not with ourselves and not with others. And so it doesn't help to put your head in the sand and pretend like everything's fine in the world and society and in everybody else, that there's that there's no evil in the world and everybody's a big tzaddik when you're seeing some ugliness and evil get stirred up. So how can we remain authentic and true and real and yet fulfill the edict of judging every person favorably?
I liked how one person said, I don't remember who it was. Oh, I think it was Elisa. She said a good thing to say if someone says something, let's say like that was disparaging about another, or like you have an experience that was disparaging about another person, but like you want to share, you could always say like, I'm not sure where this person's coming from, but blah, 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 blah. This was my experience. Like maybe they had a hard day, maybe basically it's like even when you're talking and you're sharing something that you have to get something off your chest. Let's say, like Galit was saying, maybe we could add that in. Like you never know where they're coming from, or I'm sure maybe they had good intentions, but this is what this person said to me. What do you like if you're asking that person? Also, I heard it's not good to like speak to a group of people if it's about something disparaging, but let's say if like you're confiding in one person and like, how do I take this situation, or like, how do I handle this? I don't know. Basically, you're using like that person's like a good friend that you want to like bounce off what had just happened to you. But you're not telling a group of people that like then it's going to be spread to more people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, group talking זה להלבין ברבים. It's to
Right.
offend, definitely, but
even
Um,
one-on-one, our words have
Thank you,
such a
Ronnie.
strong impact that if we are able to do that which it says in Perkei Avot, V'dan es kol ha'adam lechaf schus, to judge every person in a meritorious and favorable way, it can actually impact that person. If speaking negatively about somebody can bring out their negative traits, then speaking positively about a person can bring out the positive traits. So one of the ways to do that is like it says in Aves, don't judge your fellow until you reach their place. The Alter Rebbe explains, what does it mean? Don't judge your fellow until you reach their place. It's that their place caused them to transgress. Being that their business dealings or livelihood is in the marketplace, and then their eyes see and their heart desire, their place, their situation that they're in causes them to transgress. It's, you know, what's on TV? What are they seeing all the time? What's the rhetoric that they're getting all the time?
But isn't it like justifying like bad actions? Like when we say, oh, just because they were born, you know, and raised, you know, with parents like that, you know, that's what made them do. But it's
So
basically
when it
like,
comes to personal responsibility,
Yeah,
we have a
yes.
job to not make excuses for ourselves and not to say, I'm off the hook. We tend to be very understanding towards ourselves and very judgmental towards others. This is about flipping the script a little bit and being very understanding towards others, which doesn't mean that there isn't anything wrong there. As we said, it's not a delusional thing where the person didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes you do see something that is clearly wrong, and it's not about pretending like you didn't see it, but rather dan as kol adam lechaf schus means recognizing their place and their circumstances, and there's only a limit to how much of their childhood and upbringing and circumstances that you could possibly be aware of. And therefore, you judge them favorably and you assume that the only reason why they're doing anything wrong was because of those undesirable circumstances. But even that would just perhaps be a limud schus, learning, something that they should not be guilty for some sort of transgression. But dan lechaf schus means to judge them favorably, like there's something good there. How do you judge them favorably just because of their circumstances? Well, when we see a Jew who God placed in a situation involving tremendous challenges, for example, the situation above where we said, he has to get his livelihood in the marketplace where there's all different types of sites and temptations. That fact that he's in that challenging space itself is a sign from the very onset that Hashem has given this individual the lofty powers that he needs to overcome such challenges. Because, like it says in the Medrash, "Einay mevakesh elo lefi koichon." God does not request that which is not within the capacity of a person. God only asks that which is within their potential. So what's the limud zchus? How do we see something positive and a merit to when you see somebody doing something wrong? Is by first looking at the circumstances and the tremendous difficulty and challenge that must be. It also awakens and reveals that this person must have the sufficient strong capabilities and powers to be able to overcome those challenges. And so now you're not seeing the negative in the other, but you're seeing this person as a tremendous powerhouse, as this superpower of an individual who has the capacity to overcome even such a circumstance. So
I thought that was like a real, like, because we always learned, okay, you judge someone favorably. It's probably, everyone's heard that before. And, talk about the good qualities in a person and it brings it out, which we probably heard before. I mean, it's always good to, it's always good to reiterate, but like, we probably heard that before. But this I thought was a very novel concept that says when you see someone in a challenging situation, that means that they have such innate potential to be able to overcome such such circumstances. Let's say, like, if you see a college kid going through, like with all this hate speech around them, because they're in college right then, they have the ability to stand up to so much peer pressure. So you're looking at a person and you're like, instead of saying like, oh, what are they saying? What are they doing with the situation? Like,
yeah, because not everybody's
Totally.
placed into the circumstance that they're surrounded by encampments of hate. But somebody who is in that circumstance must be a very, very holy and special Jew. That they are right there in that type of circumstance, that they have the capacity to build bridges of love. Otherwise, God would not have placed them there. So it's seeing a tremendous strength, and then the language that Pirkei Avos uses is veheve danes kol ha'adam l'schaschus. You should, but it also, the word veheve is it will be that you judge a person favorably, meaning by looking at them in this light and speaking positively about another and recognizing the strong strengths and capabilities that they possess, then it will turn out that those desirable characteristics will manifest and be come out will manifest in actuality. So that's the Rambam's intent in saying that you judge every person favorably, and he speaks favorably of his fellows, and he doesn't denigrate him at all. By judging every person favorably, a true Torah scholar ultimately transforms even that person's undesirable characteristics into merits. Perceiving the difficult challenges the other person faces makes the scholar aware of the awesome spiritual potential, the innate praiseworthy qualities that the other person possesses within his soul, and as a result, he speaks favorably of his fellow and doesn't denigrate him at all. And so this is a tall order that he doesn't necessarily say applies across the board, but it's nevertheless something that we can look up to and aspire to be, as we have prophecies that when Mashiach comes, we will all be Talmidei Chachamim, we'll all be great scholars, in a way that it says, Verav Banayich Lemudei Hashem, that all of the Jewish people will be Torah scholars, and we will learn as if they've learned it directly from God. That's the degree to which our Torah scholarship will be when Mashiach comes. And so we can already take sort of a page out of the Talmud Chacham's playbook, which is there is a time and an avenue of admonishing a fellow and saying, hey, this is something wrong, you got to fix it, and perhaps that could work. But there is an even smoother and higher kind of a path, a more direct path of bringing out and transforming another, which is by bypassing the negativity altogether. Instead of focusing on the negative and saying, hey, you got to sweep this up, you got to get rid of this, you focus on the positive, and that brings out the positive characteristics, and then that the inner transformation is very much in line with the ultimate goal.
It reminds me of the story. I don't remember which rabbi it was, but this person went to his rabbi and he said, Rabbi, what should I do? Like, I don't like learning Torah. Like, I really, I'd rather do other stuff. And the rabbi said, because you have this challenge of that you don't like learning Torah, he's like, I have the exact opposite question. It's like, I enjoy learning Torah, so I'm not even breaking my nature. Like, I don't even have to like work for it. Like, I'm not even accomplishing that much when I'm learning. But if you don't like learning and you're like, it takes so much energy to actually stop what you're doing and learn Torah, then you're accomplishing so much when you do that. He's like, you have the ability to accomplish so much every single time that you learn Torah. Or like if a kid has a certain challenge, whatever it may be, whether a temper, and every kid is something else. Like if you have this is a challenge for you, then you have the ability to overcome this. And even if you really, really, really don't want to listen to mommy, or you don't want to talk respectfully and so strongly you feel that way, you have such a strong ability and such a passionate person you can overcome that. And with that passion directed in a positive way, you could accomplish so much. Or like these similar, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like real life situations.
So that ties us back to the name of this week's Torah portion. Who remembers the name of this week's Torah portion?
Amor.
And more. And more, and more, and more.
Amor, correct. And that's the lesson that we learned from this week's Torah portion, Amor, that we need to continually and in a lot of speech profusely speak favorably of our fellow, meaning of every Jew regarding those matters that require adjusting one's perspective to judge him in a favorable light, because such speech itself brings about that effect within the person. Previously, it was explained that Hashem's speech leads to actual change. When a Jew speaks favorably on his fellow, it similarly brings about developments and reveals the good laying latent within that person. And this explanation is also consistent with our sage's interpretation quoted by Rashi in his commentary regarding the beginning of the Torah reading, where it says, Amor ela kohanim v'yamarta, speak to them and say. Our sages explain that the repetition is that to tell the adults to teach the children. The root lahazir means to warn, is also lahazir means to make shine, radiance. Our sages are teaching that the manner in which adults should involve themselves in the education of children and the way to motivate them to stay far away from involvement in undesirable matters is through this positive outlook. Their lesson applies not only to adults and children in an age sense, but also to those who are undeveloped and advanced in their divine service. The most effective way of weaning someone from bad activities is not so much involving oneself and demonstrating the detrimental aspects of the negative, but rather by radiating light. This follows our sage's directive that it's only the left hand, the weaker hand, that should repel, but the right hand, the strong hand, is the one that brings it in. So teachers or parents should endeavor to reveal the inner good in their students, drawing it out until it's shining forth and radiating. And this explains the word emor rather than daber. There's a difference between those two words, which both mean speak or saying. Dibor refers to a firm tone. In this context, it would imply that one involves himself with the erring person, and he works to break the bad, daber, speaking harshly. Emor, by contrast, refers to a gentle speech. In this context, it would imply that one seeks to achieve refinement of another person by revealing the good that that person possesses. And that way, as a matter of course and as a natural consequence, the bad will automatically be nullified.
Baruch Hashem.
Amazing.
I
Wow.
also, I think it was the Ramban. So this is the Rambam I talked about. Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman. He said also that if a person has like a temper, like a hard time, like they get very passionate about things and sometimes comes off in a not the best way, that they should accustom themselves to to always speak in a gentle tone. So just like getting in the habit of that helps us from like yeah, I guess lashing out.
I have a quick question about ledaber ve'emor. 'Cause,
Yeah.
From the concept of lazhir, which is bringing more light, which I think it was amazing. Amira, it's from the word amir, and amir means it's tall. It's tall, and that I don't know if I missed or there is a connection to that. I'm sure there is, but just wanted to emphasize.
Yeah, I mean, emor is a term that does mean a more kind speech. Kind of like the way that the Rambam was describing the way a Talmud Chacham needs to speak to everyone, even ensuring that he's not standing too far away, lest he come across as if he's shouting.
Right, but the word amira, it's a
Mhm.
saying, brings for me, I hear the amira, like hi.
Right.
So I'm just
So that's
trying
how
to
you
the
reach-
connection.
Perhaps that's how you reach the highest heights. It's not by scolding and denigrating and giving a speech of fire and brimstone, but by
Right.
speaking about the love that Hashem has for every single yid, how holy and precious you are. You were chosen by God to be a divine ambassador here in this world, and therefore possess all the strengths and capabilities needed in order to get this job done. You're smart, you're creative, you could figure out a way to do it. And by bringing out all of those qualities, by really seeing that in another, because this is not a mental gymnastics trick. This is a real reality. We know that God invests the powers into each and every one of us that we need in order to fulfill our mission in this world. And therefore, if somebody is in a dark place or in a particularly challenging world, then that means that they have unique soul strengths and capabilities to be the bridges of love in that world.
Would you mind to repeat the difference? I mean, with amira and le'emor, I understand, but ledaber dvarim, because in Hebrew, davar, it's also a thing. So maybe
Yeah.
brings that down to materialism versus
Yeah, so-
spiritual.
So the bear is more of like a harsh command. It's like it's a harsh speech.
Right. There's any secrets in the letters of why those, like, what's the root of it? Like lazhir, it's to warn, but also to shine. I'm sure, maybe ledaber has any double meaning there.
Well, I'll have to look into it more because I'm not really sure why daber and emor have that different connotation. But the Medrash points it out that there is those the different words that mean the different things.
Okay, thanks.
It's also in the Talmud and in Makkos, page 11a, that speaks about how daber is a firm tone. It's also when Hashem says to speak to the men and speak to the women, he uses the word daber to the men and emor to the women.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to know if the extra meaning that those words have has anything to do with their the intention behind it.
But here, when it's speaking about this command to excessive speech, where is it? Even in Torah, we're supposed to speak in a very concise form. Try to get the whole lesson in as short as possible. The story of of the rabbi who gave a sermon on Yom Kippur. And you know how Yom Kippur sermons go. Everybody's there all day and it could get pretty drawn out. And the rabbi's speaking and it's an hour and a half and everybody's just, when is the speech going to be over? So one of the congregants decides to go to the rabbi after the speech and it says, Rabbi, that was amazing. All the newspapers need to hear what the sermon that you just shared. But can you share it in 10 minutes so that it could be it fit in the newspapers? And the rabbi's, all feeling proud of himself that they're coming over, they want to promulgate his speech. He says, sure, yeah, we could do that. So then why didn't you? You were able to say it in 10 minutes. Why didn't you? Because even Taita, you're supposed to say it in the most concise way possible. But where are we meant to speak a lot is when speaking about the praises of another and bringing out the good qualities and how precious. And that's really in a way the whole Taita is given in order to show the special heights and bond that a Yid has with Hashem. A Jew precedes the Torah. The Torah's function is to reveal that holiness and preciousness of a Jew.
I remember also like along these lines, there was a certain man that I don't remember what he did in history, like wasn't good for the Jewish people, basically. And the Lubavitch Rebbe was talking about him in a positive way. And someone asked, like, how could you talk about this guy in a positive way? And it's like, it's not because of anything that he did in the past. It's because of what he's going to do for the Jewish people in the future. Like, I thought that was very interesting because it's like,
Right. Because it's like we could be so quick to label people as the other or the enemies of this and the enemies of that, or they're anti-Semites and whatever. Or we could try to speak or find some sort of positive thing and transform them into an ally.
like you want to be like you want that he basically wanted that person to do good things for the Jewish people who was doing negative things for the Jewish people. So speaking about him in a positive way, and then that guy ended up, doing good, being good for the Jewish people, someone who wasn't in the past. And I noticed with my kids also that like I had certain kids that, I mean, every kid, they go through their challenging times at different moments. Thank God they're not all challenging at the same time. But there's always like one super challenging kid at all times. And one of my kids, I noticed that like just like talking about like all the things that she does good by bedtime before she goes to sleep,
Oh,
really helped her. Like she's acting a lot better. Still not perfect, but I'm saying like by leaps and bounds, doing so much better, and her behavior is so much better than it used to be. Like in her interactions with her siblings and other people.
But it looks like according to the formula, according to what we learned, you wouldn't have 7 kids unless Hashem would not think you can deal with them.
Right, exactly.
We have
Yeah,
good
this type of Dan L'Chatzkos we could do on ourselves as well. And
Okay.
whenever we're in a situation that it seems like it's too tough or we're stuck and it's too hard for us, we recognize that we are not like a ping pong ball that is being flung from one end of the world to the other, but we are divine ambassadors. We're placed here. We're put here for a purpose. And then we're able to find, what is my purpose? Why am I here? As soon as you find the purpose of why I'm here, then you can transform it from a place of constriction to a place of freedom.
Also, one little quick parenting thing that I really like, I don't remember where I heard it, but I do it a lot, is when you see a kid doing something wrong, instead of, let's say like a kid's eating with their hands, for example, and like you want them to eat with a fork and with a fork, like a mensch, instead of being like, stop eating with your hands, so just to say it starting with remember to use a fork next time you eat. Like just,
reinforcement.
you're such a wonderful kid. You're so well behaved. Let's remember to use a fork, and then they don't feel like they're being
being
attacked.
criticized. Yeah, criticized.
Yeah,
I
it's
I
like
like
that.
that word of just let's remind ourselves. Let's say they go to the park, and let's say a kid has a hard time with sharing or taking turns on a swing or whatever it is. Like before you go to the park, we're going to the park. Let's remember to take turns. But when it comes to the swing or the slide, if there's other kids that need a turn, let's remember. And then when they're at the park, you'll see that they just they just had that reminder to do that, they're more likely to actually like share, take turns and or whatever, you know, that each kid has a hard time with, but just like little reminders.
It's actually because in politics, what's most expedient is to denigrate the other. The most expedient way to get elected is to show that your opponent is the devil. But the fact is that while that might work to get you sort of elected short term, there is sort of like that honeymoon stage where people love the new politician until it's like, oh, actually he's not fulfilling any of his promises and therefore, you know, sinks down. And this goes through cycles. And I'm not talking, you know, any particular direction, right or left or anything like that. But there is a more challenging, less expedient, but more prudent method, which is to reveal the virtues. And this is something when you're not just trying to win a particular election, but you're doing a long relay race of 3,000 years of Jewish history. Our job is not to reveal how what kind of monsters and villains Hamas is. Like anybody who can't see that is willfully and you know, trying to put their heads in the sands. Our job is not to focus on the horrendous evil that exists in this world, but on the value and the virtue of every Jew living in Eretz Yisrael, of the Jewish people around the world, and what they contribute to this world, and reveal that within ourselves and within our fellow by speaking positively about the tzaddikim, about righteous individuals, and bringing out that righteousness in anyone where there is at least that potential, that there is that goodness and that righteousness. And by bringing that out, there's a concept of ma'at or doicha har b'choshech. A little bit of light dispels a lot of darkness. It seems, because we live in an upside down world, that it works the other way around. A little bit of hatred and bigotry, or a little bit of denigration of another and calling them all of the names in the books, has a more expedient effect on the conversation, on what's going on. But the thing with expediency is that it's not eternal. It's flippant. It lasts, and it could so quickly just turn. So, you know, right now there's this, you know, obviously big media campaign to try and demonize the Jews and demonize Israel and all of that. But you know, the same type of energy can turn around and then demonize the encampments of hate, and then people are going to be like, you know, what's wrong with these people, and it's going to backfire with this type of path. Ends up splintering, and then you have infighting and fighting within fighting, and there's only one man standing. It's the only way that such a avenue can lead to. It never leads to peace. It only leads to, you know, once you win this war, so then you have a civil war. And then once you win that civil war, you have a civil war within the civil war. And then you have a civil war within that civil war until there's one person standing.
So true.
But the way of looking for the positive and calling it out and revealing it and speaking positively about another is one that brings shalom. It brings unity. It'll expand. That unity will, God willing, expand to the entire globe. And just like Hashem makes peace in the heavens, He'll make peace for us down here in this world. And very soon, it'll be universally felt, seen, understood that Oseh shalom b'romav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. That there will be peace in Eretz Yisrael, and if there's peace in Eretz Yisrael, that means there's peace across the world, because this time we're not running out of exile because exile is so bad. We're going to not out of rush like we did in Egypt, but with a slow, confident stride and straight. We're going to walk out of exile, because when it's when all the Yidden return to Eretz Yisrael, it's going to be in a way where it's safe for Jewish people anywhere and everywhere in the world. Not because it's the only safe place for the Jewish people in the world, but because the entire world is overflowing with goodness and positivity and peace.
Awesome.
That's good. Now we'll put into practice what we just learned. Throughout the week.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
What I gathered is, especially when we don't live in Israel. Okay, so my perception was that things should be in the light all the time, and I used to get frustrated not seeing that light. And what I'm gathering from this conversation, this is the vision I'm receiving, that actually, like you said, small light can shine, in a big darkness. It's that everything is darkness and we are that light. So
That's
not
it.
expecting things to be the light, knowing that it's dark outside and our job is to be that light. And perhaps for me, feels it'll be easier to do those right things versus feeling that confusing why the world is not like that. I think that's what I got from this lesson.
And seeing and recognizing the light in our fellow Jews and helping them to, giving them the match. so
That's
that
your
they can-
job.
No, that's all of our job. we're all Neiris Lahoyer. Neiris Lahoyer, lights to shine, doesn't just mean that our candle is shining, but lighting up other candles as well.
If they're sad, I'll
That's the
take it. But if they're doing
potency.
bad things,
That's the
I
potency
prefer to-
of a candle, is that it can light another candle without it diminishing your light.
I
what
think
about
that's
praying
also,
for
like-
them in a way?
I think also like as a parent,
Or
like
wish
like one thing different about, let's say, a parent or just a regular individual is like a parent, your goal in the world is not just that you fulfill your mission in the world, but that your child or your spouse, whoever whoever you're responsible for, whatever connected with, that they fulfill their potential. You know what I mean? It's like for your kid, you want your kid to fulfill the maximum to their potential, what they can accomplish in the world. And if they did that, then you fulfilled your job. Like, then you're like, I made it as a parent, you know what I mean? So to speak. So I think that like knowing this, or when we see them, in these challenging situations, be like, oh, you're so passionate. Let's say a kid is stubborn. Let's say, I don't know if anyone has stubborn kids. Well, me.
No, only you.
we're
only-
Jewish. All of our kids are stubborn.
But like if you see the stubbornness of a kid,
by default.
like, you know what? This behavior of like really, really wanting something and not giving up until you get it is like, God willing, in the world, like when you really want a certain job or you really want to accomplish something, like you will make sure that you accomplish whatever it is you want to accomplish. You won't be like, oh, I did a little bit of work. Okay, I'm done. I'm finished.
I
because
replaced stubborn with strong-willed, so like,
Yeah,
so strong. Feel
Oh, no.
better.
so like with that strong will,
All my kids are
that-
strong-willed. It makes me
Right.
feel
like
much
you could tell your kid, well, even when they're having the temper tantrum, like, with
Tiring.
strong will, you could accomplish a lot.
Yeah, but we
You
really
know?
did that with our oldest. We didn't say, "Oh, you're bossing everybody around. Stop being so bossy." We said, "You have a tremendous leadership capabilities." And now she's doing school for Freda. She's leading art classes for the younger kids. And instead,
Awesome.
really by working within and trying to see it as positive qualities, which they really are, and helping them to really flourish. And it's like people ask, how do you do it? With 3 kids, it felt like the house was a circus and falling down. And now we have 7 kids, but it's 7 kids, but half of them are on our team. I mean, they're all on our team, but I mean, like, half of them are
You can put them to work.
are caring, are part of the team parent.
Yeah. But also like each child changes, like it changes parents' personality, like because they have their
Right. Yeah, there's a whole nother
their
conversation about
challenges, yes, and you change.
the mitzvah to have the mitzvah to have kids is also an empowerment as well, that it opens up new pipelines of blessings, capabilities, finances, emotional strength, intellectual capability. It opens up new channels of blessings with each child born.
Yeah.
But that's besides for just that the more we're able to see the positive within our children, the more it's manifest, more it brings it out. And then we could apply that to interpersonal relationships, and then we can go in a way of what's called lechatchila ariber. There's the birthday of the Rebbe Maharash, which we celebrated last week on the 2nd of Iyar. He was known for this statement. The world says, maybe try to go around or under if you can't find any way. But I say, lechatchila ariber. The first thing that you should do is jump over the top. So the lechatchila ariber way of positively influencing another is focusing on their positive capabilities, rather than trying to go under or around by addressing the negative characteristics or trying to circumvent it. Like we'll create the circumstances where you're never triggered, so that way we'll go around the whole obstacle. Is not ever going to really deal with those characteristics. Lechatchila ariber means you right away see the goodness within it, the potential, the positive traits, and then you're already flying high.
Yeah. It's like speaking about positive. Sammy, he went to a Jewish center daycare when he was like 2 or 3, I think 3 or 4 years old. So, and they were teaching kids. They all always said to them like, "You're a good child," and they were talking about choices. So this is the good choice, and they gave like list of like
Right.
helping your friend, like sharing, and bad choices. And so like I picked up Sammy one day, and he's like, "I'm a good boy, but I made a bad choice. I ripped the book." It was so cute. Like he was just 3-year-old. Like it was like super cute. So I was like,
Right.
so I
Because-
was learning from there. Was this great concept? Like
beautiful.
you always
Yeah,
say
and-
like you're a great child, but you just made a bad choice. So they feel so,
In
oh,
Yiddish, we use the parenting expression of "se passt nicht für dir." It's unbefitting of you, which
Mhm.
rather than saying you're a bad kid, you're saying you're so much better than that. That action is unbefitting of you because you are befitting of such higher and loftier ideals. So I have my friend who's on Stanford, and they were having serious problems on the campus with these encampments of hate, and they had also like Israel tents, but then the campus said you have to take them down, and of course the Jewish people listened and they followed the directions, but then the other camp didn't. And so he was saying, "Listen, we followed. We took down the tent when we were asked, are you going to enforce it or you're not?" And there were some serious problems that were going on with the campus and the way that they were handling the situation. And rather than even in speaking of the campus, even in speaking of them in a negative light, he rather said Stanford is it needs to live up to its high ideals, quoted certain, statements about what Stanford University stands for, and challenging them to stand up to their own, ideals of morality and education.
That's a good
The
one.
Anti-Defamation League is doing this right now. They're setting up for colleges and sending in questionnaires to the top officials and to the board members, and setting them up to see if they're good enough to get our kids. Because hey, listen, if we're going to go in there, we're going to send our children into colleges. You want them to be places where they're safe. You
Right, so
probably feel
first-
that right now.
Yeah, so first of all, yeah, you got to be selective, but even so, there are Jewish kids in all of these colleges, and they should be safe places for Jewish students, and that's the ideals of the college themselves, is that it should be safe for every kid. And so rather than this sort of negative speech of condemnation, and you failed over here and you didn't do this right, and I'm ashamed of you for all of this, you can by rephrasing it in the positive, that the university should stand up to its name.
Definitely.
Go back to the kiddos. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
I,
Have a
Yeah,
great day,
good night,
guys.
Kelly.
thank you so
Everyone
much.
talk.
Thank you.
And
Thank
Anna and
you.
Kara. Good night.
Thank you so much.